Captain Sarah Mitchell adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and stared at the wall of monitors displaying satellite feeds from across the Middle East. The fluorescent lights in the joint operations center hummed overhead as she analyzed patterns that others missed. Her colleagues called her the Analyst with a mixture of respect and gentle teasing. At 28, she had already earned a reputation for spotting threats before they materialized. Sarah came from a small farming town in Iowa, where her father taught her to hunt deer in the dense woodlands behind their property. She could thread a needle with a rifle at 300 yards by age 12, but her real talent lay in reading the land, understanding movement patterns, and predicting where her target would go next. These same skills now served her well in counterterrorism analysis. The morning briefing had been routine, until Colonel James Harrison dropped a folder on her desk. Inside were reconnaissance photos from a forward operating base near the Syrian border. The images showed what appeared to be normal civilian activity in a small village. But something felt wrong to Sarah. She spent hours studying every pixel, every shadow, every detail that seemed out of place. "Mitchell, what do you see?" Colonel Harrison asked, leaning over her shoulder. Sarah pointed to a series of seemingly random tire tracks in the dirt roads. "These vehicle patterns don't match normal civilian traffic, sir. Look at the depth of these impressions and the spacing between wheel marks. These are heavy trucks moving in convoy formation during nighttime hours." She pulled up additional satellite images from the past week, overlaying them on her computer screen. The locals have been avoiding the eastern section of the village completely. No children playing, no women hanging laundry, no elderly men sitting in their usual spots. Something has them scared. Colonel Harrison studied the images more carefully. Sarah continued her analysis, highlighting areas of concern with her laser pointer. "These 3 buildings here show heat signatures consistent with weapons storage. The thermal imaging reveals unusual metal concentrations that don't match typical household items. The base was located in a strategically important corridor used by various militant groups to move supplies and personnel between countries. Intelligence reports suggested that a high-value target known as the Engineer had been spotted in the region. This individual was responsible for designing improvised explosive devices that had killed dozens of American soldiers and countless civilians." Sarah's analysis suggested that the village was being used as a staging area for a major operation. The tire tracks indicated heavy equipment had been moved through recently, possibly rocket launchers or large weapons caches. The avoidance patterns of local civilians suggested they knew something dangerous was happening in their community. "I need to get closer to confirm my assessment," Sarah told Colonel Harrison. "The satellite imagery can only tell us so much. We need ground-level intelligence to verify what we're seeing." Colonel Harrison frowned. "Mitchell, you're an analyst, not a field operative. Your job is to stay here and provide intelligence support." Sarah understood his concern, but her instincts told her this was bigger than a typical weapons cache. The patterns she was seeing suggested coordination between multiple terror cells, possibly planning a coordinated strike against American interests in the region. "Sir, with respect, I know these patterns better than anyone. I can spot details that others might miss. If we're going to intercept whatever they're planning, we need accurate intelligence from someone who understands what to look for." The debate continued for several minutes before Colonel Harrison finally agreed to include Sarah in a reconnaissance mission. She would accompany a small team of Special Forces operators to gather intelligence on the ground. Her job would be to observe and analyze while the soldiers provided security. Sarah spent the next 2 days preparing for her first field mission. She studied maps of the area, memorized escape routes, and reviewed protocols for operating in hostile territory. Despite her hunting background, she had never been in actual combat before. Her training with the military had focused on intelligence analysis rather than combat operations. The night before departure, Sarah cleaned and checked her standard-issue sidearm, though she hoped never to use it. Her primary weapon would be her eyes and her analytical mind. She packed lightweight surveillance equipment, cameras with telephoto lenses, and electronic monitoring devices that could detect communications traffic. The team consisted of 4 Special Forces operators led by Sergeant First Class Mike Rodriguez, a veteran with 3 combat deployments. Rodriguez was initially skeptical about bringing an analyst into the field, but he respected Colonel Harrison's judgment. "Stay close, keep quiet, and let us handle any trouble," Rodriguez told Sarah during their final briefing. "Your job is to observe and report. Our job is to keep you alive while you do it." The helicopter insertion went smoothly, landing the team 3 kilometers from the target village under cover of darkness. Sarah felt her heart racing as they moved through the rocky terrain using night vision goggles to navigate. This was completely different from analyzing satellite images. In an air-conditioned office as they approached the village perimeter, Sarah immediately noticed details that confirmed her earlier analysis. Fresh tire tracks from heavy vehicles were clearly visible in the soft earth. Unusual radio antenna configurations on several buildings suggested communication equipment, beyond what civilians would typically possess, through her binoculars. Sarah observed guards posted at strategic locations throughout the village. These weren't casual lookouts but trained sentries maintaining disciplined watch patterns. The level of organization indicated military-style coordination rather than typical criminal activity. "Count at least 12 armed individuals in visual range," Rodriguez whispered into his radio. "This is definitely not a civilian village anymore." Sarah documented everything she observed, taking digital photographs and making detailed notes about defensive positions, patrol patterns, and equipment locations. Her farming background helped her read the terrain and predict the best approaches and escape routes. After 2 hours of observation, the team had gathered substantial intelligence confirming Sarah's initial assessment. The village was indeed being used as a staging area for terrorist operations. Large weapons caches were stored in multiple buildings, and the coordination level suggested preparation for a major attack. As they prepared to withdraw and report their findings, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Through her telephoto lens, she spotted a man examining what appeared to be detailed maps of American military installations. Even from a distance, she recognized him from intelligence photographs as the engineer himself. "We have visual confirmation of the primary target," she whispered urgently to Rodriguez. "The engineer is here, and he's planning something big." This discovery changed everything. Instead of simply gathering intelligence about weapons storage, they had stumbled upon the planning stages of what could be a devastating attack on American forces. Sarah's analytical mind immediately began processing the implications while her heart pounded with the realization that they were witnessing history in the making. The team now faced a critical decision: withdraw immediately to report their findings, or maintain surveillance to gather more intelligence about the planned attack. Either choice carried significant risks, but the potential consequences of missing this opportunity could be catastrophic. Sarah found herself at the center of a situation that would test not only her analytical skills but also her courage under pressure. The quiet analyst who spent her days studying computer screens was about to discover capabilities she never knew she possessed. Rodriguez made the decision to maintain surveillance despite the increased risk. The intelligence value of observing the engineer's planning session was too important to abandon. Sarah positioned herself behind a rocky outcrop that provided clear lines of sight to the building where the terrorist leader was working. Through her scope, Sarah watched the engineer spread detailed architectural plans across a table. Even from their concealed position, she could see these weren't random targets. The precision and detail of the documents suggested months of preparation for coordinated attacks on American facilities. "Can you identify any of those target locations?" Rodriguez whispered. Sarah adjusted her telephoto lens and began photographing the documents. Her training in pattern recognition allowed her to identify key features even from a distance. "Those look like base layouts for our installations in Iraq and Afghanistan." He's studying security checkpoints, guard rotations, and vulnerable entry points. The implications were staggering. The engineer wasn't planning a single attack, but rather a coordinated strike across multiple locations. The weapons caches they had observed were likely being prepared for simultaneous distribution to terror cells operating near American bases throughout the region. As Sarah continued documenting the terrorist planning session, she noticed increased activity throughout the village. Additional vehicles arrived carrying more armed fighters. What had been a staging area was rapidly becoming a major operational headquarters for a network of terror cells. "We need to call in an airstrike," Rodriguez suggested. "Take out the engineer and his entire operation while they're concentrated in one location." Sarah understood the logic, but her analytical mind saw a bigger picture. "If we strike now, we eliminate this cell, but we don't know how many other cells are already in position. The engineer might have already distributed attack plans and weapons to teams we haven't identified." The debate highlighted the classic tension between immediate tactical action and longer-term strategic intelligence gathering. Eliminating the engineer would remove a key threat, but it might also trigger attacks that were already in motion while leaving other terrorist networks intact. "We need to capture him alive," Sarah concluded. "Force him to reveal the locations of other cells and the timing of planned attacks. Dead terrorists can't provide intelligence about their networks." Rodriguez looked at her skeptically. "Mitchell, you're talking about a capture mission against a hardened target with minimal backup. That's not what we came here to do." Sarah knew he was right, but her analysis of the intelligence suggested they were looking at potential attacks that could kill hundreds of American soldiers and civilians. The risk of action had to be weighed against the risk of inaction. Before they could resolve the debate, their situation changed dramatically. One of the terrorist sentries spotted light reflecting off Sarah's camera lens. Within seconds, shouts erupted throughout the village as guards moved to surround their position. "Contact, we're compromised." Rodriguez called into his radio while motioning for his team to take defensive positions. Sarah felt her training take over as adrenaline flooded her system. Despite never having been in combat, her hunting background had taught her to remain calm under pressure and make precise movements when everything depended on accuracy. The terrorist fighters moved with military discipline, suggesting professional training rather than amateur enthusiasm. They advanced using coordinated fire and movement techniques while attempting to flank the American position from multiple directions. Rodriguez and his team returned fire while calling for immediate extraction support. The helicopter that had inserted them was 20 minutes away, but the tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. They were outnumbered 3-1 and surrounded by hostiles who knew the terrain better than they did. "We need to move to higher ground," Sarah called out, spotting a defensive position on a hill overlooking the village. Her analysis of the terrain suggested it would provide better fields of fire and limit the number of directions from which they could be attacked. As they moved, Sarah noticed that the terrorist fighters were making tactical errors in their excitement to capture or kill the American team. They were bunching up instead of maintaining proper spacing, making themselves vulnerable to concentrated fire. "Rodriguez, they're channeling themselves into that narrow ravine," Sarah pointed out. "If we can get positioned on that ridge, we can control their approach route." Her ability to read terrain and predict movement patterns was proving as valuable in combat as it had been in intelligence analysis. The same skills that helped her track deer through Iowa forests were now helping her track armed terrorists through Middle Eastern mountains. The team reached the defensive position just as the terrorist assault intensified. Sarah found herself behind a rock formation that provided cover while offering clear sight lines back toward the village. For the first time in her military career, she was about to use her marksmanship skills in actual combat. Through her scope, Sarah could see the engineer directing his fighters' movements while staying protected behind the village buildings. He was treating this like a tactical exercise, using the American team as training targets for his fighters while observing their capabilities. "He's studying us," Sarah realized. The engineer is using this engagement to gather intelligence about American tactics and equipment. This insight changed their tactical approach. Instead of simply trying to survive until extraction, they needed to deny the engineer the intelligence he was seeking while possibly turning the Situation to their advantage. Sarah spotted a terrorist fighter positioning himself to place effective fire on Rodriguez's position. Without hesitation, she acquired the target through her scope and squeezed the trigger. The terrorist dropped instantly, eliminated by a precise shot to the center of mass. The engagement continued for 15 minutes before the sound of approaching helicopters caused the terrorist fighters to begin withdrawing toward prepared escape routes. Sarah continued providing accurate supporting fire while documenting the terrorists' withdrawal patterns for future intelligence analysis. As the immediate threat diminished, Sarah realized she had fired her weapon 12 times during the engagement. Each shot had been carefully aimed and purposeful, drawing on years of hunting experience that had taught her to make every bullet count. "Outstanding shooting, Mitchell," Rodriguez called out. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" Sarah wiped sweat from her forehead while keeping her eyes focused on potential threat areas. "My father taught me that if you're going to take a shot, you better make it count. We couldn't afford to waste ammunition hunting deer, and we can't afford to waste ammunition here either." The extraction helicopters arrived with additional special forces support, but the engineer and most of his fighters had escaped through tunnels and hidden routes they had prepared in advance. However, the intelligence gathered during the engagement was substantial. Sarah had documented the terrorist operational structure, defensive capabilities, and escape procedures. More importantly, she had photographed the target locations the engineer was planning to attack. This intelligence would allow American forces to strengthen security at vulnerable installations and potentially intercept terrorist cells before they could execute their missions. During the flight back to base, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her role had changed in just a few hours. She had gone from analyzing satellite images in an office to engaging armed terrorists in direct combat. The experience had revealed capabilities she never knew she possessed, while confirming that her analytical skills were as valuable in the field as they were behind a desk. Colonel Harrison was waiting when they landed, eager to debrief the team about their unexpected encounter with the engineer. Sarah's photographs and observations would form the basis for a major counterterrorism operation, designed to intercept the planned attacks before they could be executed. "Mitchell, you've just provided us with the most significant intelligence breakthrough we've had in months," Colonel Harrison told her. "The question is, are you ready to help us act on this intelligence?" Sarah looked at her rifle, still warm from the engagement, then back at the satellite images on her computer screen. She was beginning to understand that her most effective contribution might come from combining her analytical expertise with her newly proven field capabilities. Colonel Harrison's question hung in the air as Sarah considered her response. The intelligence they had gathered revealed a terrorist network preparing coordinated attacks across 5 different American installations. The photographs she had taken showed detailed facility layouts, guard schedules, and vulnerability assessments that could only have been compiled through months of surveillance. "Sir, based on my analysis of the engineer's documents, we have perhaps 72 hours before these attacks are executed," Sarah reported. "The level of preparation suggests they're moving to an operational timeline." The briefing room filled with senior officers as Sarah presented her findings. Using enlarged photographs and tactical maps, she outlined the scope of the terrorist threat. The planned attacks targeted supply convoys, forward operating bases, and a major logistics hub that supported multiple combat units. The coordination required for simultaneous attacks across this geographic area suggests the engineer has been building this network for over a year, Sarah explained. "But there's a weakness in their operational structure that we can exploit." General Patricia Walsh, the regional commander, leaned forward with interest. "What kind of weakness?" Sarah highlighted communication patterns she had observed during the engagement. The engineer maintains centralized control over his network. Individual cells don't have complete operational autonomy. They're waiting for final confirmation and last-minute intelligence updates before executing their attacks. This meant that disrupting the engineer's communications could potentially prevent or delay multiple attacks while American forces strengthened their defenses. However, it also meant they needed to locate the engineer's new headquarters quickly before he could distribute final attack orders. "I need to get back out there," Sarah said, surprising everyone in the room. "The engineer saw our capabilities during the engagement. He'll modify his security procedures and change locations, but he'll follow predictable patterns based on his operational requirements." General Walsh studied Sarah carefully. "Captain Mitchell, you're an intelligence analyst, not a special operations soldier. What you accomplished during the engagement was remarkable, but hunting terrorists is different from hunting deer." Sarah understood the general's concern, but her analysis indicated a narrow window of opportunity that required immediate action. "Ma'am, I know this terrain now, and I understand the engineer's decision-making patterns. He'll move to a location that provides the same operational advantages as the village, but with better security." She pulled up topographical maps showing the region's geography. "There are only 3 locations within 50 kilometers that meet his requirements: elevated positions with multiple escape routes, access to major transportation corridors, and proximity to communication infrastructure. The most likely location was an abandoned mining facility built into a mountainside, 30 kilometers northeast of the original village. It offered natural fortification, existing tunnel systems for escape routes, and line-of-sight communications with multiple cells throughout the region. If I'm right, the engineer will establish his new headquarters there within the next 18 hours, Sarah concluded. After that, he'll distribute final attack orders and disperse his network. We'll lose our chance to prevent these attacks. General Walsh made the decision to authorize a joint operation combining special forces assault capabilities with Sarah's intelligence analysis skills. The mission would attempt to capture the engineer while disrupting his terrorist network before the planned attacks could be executed. Sarah spent the next 6 hours preparing for what everyone understood would be a more dangerous mission than her first field deployment. The engineer now knew American forces were actively hunting him, and he would be expecting another attempt to locate his operations. The assault team was larger this time, consisting of 12 Special Forces operators, supported by helicopter gunships and rapid reaction forces positioned to intercept escaping terrorists. Sarah's role would be providing real-time intelligence analysis while supporting the assault team with precision marksmanship. "Mitchell, you've proven you can handle yourself in combat," Rodriguez told her as they prepared for insertion. "But this time they'll be ready for us. Stay focused on your job and trust your training." The helicopter approach to the mining facility was conducted under cover of darkness, but thermal imaging revealed that Sarah's analysis had been correct. The facility showed heat signatures consistent with 30 to 40 individuals, and communication antenna arrays confirmed it was being used as an operational headquarters. "Target location confirmed," Sarah reported. "Multiple heat signatures in the main facility building, guard positions established at all major approaches, and communication equipment consistent with network command and control operations." As they moved into assault positions, Sarah spotted something that made her heart race with excitement and fear. Through her scope, she could see the engineer himself standing near a communication console, apparently coordinating with his network of terrorist cells. "Visual confirmation of primary target," she whispered. "The engineer is in the main facility building, northeast corner, 2nd floor." The assault began with coordinated strikes on the terrorist guard positions. Sarah provided overwatch from a position that allowed her to observe the entire facility while supporting the assault team with precise fire when needed. Her first shot eliminated a terrorist fighter who was positioning a rocket-propelled grenade to target the assault team. The second shot disabled a communications operator who was attempting to warn other cells about the American attack. As the assault team moved through the facility, Sarah maintained constant surveillance of the engineer's location. He was attempting to destroy sensitive documents and communication equipment rather than trying to escape immediately. "He's prioritizing intelligence destruction over personal survival," Sarah observed. "The engineer is trying to protect his network even if it means getting captured." This insight allowed the assault team to predict the engineer's movements and position, themselves to intercept him before he could complete the destruction of critical intelligence materials. Sarah's ability to understand decision-making patterns was proving as valuable as her marksmanship skills. The final confrontation occurred when the engineer attempted to escape through a tunnel system connected to the mining facility. Sarah had anticipated this possibility and positioned herself to cover the primary tunnel exit. As the engineer emerged from the tunnel entrance, Sarah had a clear shot at one of the most wanted terrorists in the region. Her scope was perfectly aligned, her breathing steady, and her finger rested lightly on the trigger. "I have the shot," she radioed to Rodriguez. "Take him alive if possible," came the response. "We need the intelligence he can provide." Sarah adjusted her aim slightly and fired a precise shot that shattered the engineer's weapon and wounded him in the shoulder, incapacitating him without causing life-threatening injuries. The shot required extraordinary accuracy at over 400 meters, but her years of hunting experience had prepared her for exactly this type of challenging precision. Shooting. The capture of the engineer yielded intelligence that prevented all 5 planned terrorist attacks and led to the identification of dozens of terrorist cells operating throughout the region. Sarah's analysis and field operations had disrupted a network that could have killed hundreds of American soldiers and civilians. In the weeks following the successful mission, Sarah found herself reassigned to a new position that combined intelligence analysis with field operations. She had proven that her analytical capabilities were enhanced rather than limited by direct operational experience. Colonel Harrison recommended her for promotion and specialized training that would allow her to lead similar operations in the future. "Mitchell, you've redefined what it means to be an intelligence analyst," he told her. "You've shown that the most effective intelligence comes from combining analytical expertise with operational experience." Sarah accepted the new role while maintaining her commitment to preventing terrorist attacks through accurate intelligence and precise action when necessary. She had discovered that her true calling lay not just in analyzing threats from a distance, but in directly engaging those threats when American lives were at stake. The quiet analyst who had earned the nickname the Analyst had become something much more dangerous to America's enemies. She had become a soldier who could think like an analyst and fight like a warrior, combining the best of both worlds to protect the soldiers and civilians who depended on accurate intelligence and decisive action. Her transformation from desk analyst to field operative demonstrated that the most effective counterterrorism efforts required individuals who could seamlessly transition between intellectual analysis and direct action. Sarah Mitchell had become exactly that kind of soldier, and her enemies would never see her coming until it was too late.